Theodore Roosevelt once said, "The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who knows the great enthusiasms, the great devotions, and spends himself in a worthy cause, who at best, if he wins, knows the thrills of high achievement, and if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who know neither victory nor defeat."
Welcome back, everybody, to Day Before Rehab, episode 3. If you like what we've heard so far, please subscribe, share. We can certainly use all the support we can get to get our message out there. Today, I'm doing this episode alone, with the approval and acceptance of my wife, Megan. Today is February 11th, 2024, and I wanted to dedicate this episode to my dad. He was the greatest person on the planet. That's all there is to it. Today would have been his 23rd year of continuous sobriety, but unfortunately, cancer took him out 3 years ago, January 7th. Today is also my sister's birthday, my beautiful, wonderful sister, Natalie. She turns 38 today. Coincidentally, my dad's sober date is the same as her birthday, and that alone explains the connection that those two had. We had a rough upbringing. Not the whole time, but while I was in high school, it was a little tough. And, I'm 3 years older than my sister. So I think she was either 7th or 8th grade when the shit really hit the fan. And, my dad's own day before rehab sort of was February 10th. And he got sober on February 11th, 23 years ago. So, I just wanted to get into a couple of things. My dad died less than a week and a half before I got married. My wife and I got engaged November 2018. Our wedding date was supposed to be in April of 2020, and then obviously COVID shut the world down, and we had to reschedule. At the time, no one knew how badly COVID was going to be and to what extent our lives were going to be, shaken up and totally thrown off balance. And so we rescheduled for July 2020. We quickly found out that was not an option. So fast forward a month, August 2020, my dad got some bad news. His cancer came back and it spread everywhere. Bone, blood, spine, everywhere. But at this point, we had already rescheduled our wedding for January 2021 with the total 100% anticipation that my dad would be there. Unfortunately, he died January 7th. The funeral was about a week later. And the day after the funeral, my family and I got on a plane to Mexico where I could marry my wife. And that's what happened. And at the time, I was so I wasn't processing any of this. I couldn't feel a fucking thing. The way I describe the relationship I had with my dad is if you take the closest father and son relationship that you have ever known in your entire life, we were closer. And the same would go for any father-daughter relationship because my dad and my sister were closer. And that's how he made us feel. So, it's a shame that we're going through this journey, my family and I, without him, because, you work your balls off and try to be a good person and accomplish things. And I failed miserably at that for such a long time. And, with 107 days sober, I wish he could just watch me now. And he can't. And so I wanted to share a couple things. I was fortunate enough to give the eulogy at my father's funeral. And, this was in my mind, the most selfless act of my entire life. I was able to put things on paper and let the world know, like the world was watching, let my family know, and everyone that was close to us know how great of a guy he was. And, when my dad's cancer came back, my sister and I were, I don't think we really processed how extreme this was. And, I have a really demanding job, and not that my sister doesn't, but she has a little bit more flexibility. So the very first meeting with the oncologist and his doctors I went to, and, I think my dad was already on some pain medication, deservedly so. And he battled his own demons with that because, he was 20 years sober at this point. And he talked to his guys, and he had cancer everywhere. And if anyone was supposed to be on pain meds, it was him. So we're in the doctor's office, and I could tell my dad was feeling a little loose. And the oncologist is explaining how severe this is. And I'm listening. My sister is, I think she was not on FaceTime or speaker or something like that. And my dad asked the oncologist, Doc, he was very blunt, a very blunt, old school Italian, off the boat Italian. And he was very blunt. And he says, Doc, just give it to me straight. How much time do I got? And the doctor said, with this treatment and that treatment, I could see this lasting 6 to 9 months. And I remember thinking to myself, 6 to 9 months. I was 37 years old, and I just couldn't believe that that's what he had said. And my dad, I don't think he processed it, because I remember my sister telling me a while later that my dad called her up and said, Natalie, I'm going to die. And yeah, that's exactly what happened. So, I'm not going to read the eulogy, but there's some stories that I wanted to share. And, for years, I would hate it when people would post on Facebook, like these long-winded prophecies to their loved ones. And, I think I was just being a selfless, hating son of a bitch. And, this isn't for me to feel good. I feel that the world, or anyone that's going to watch this, needs to know that my dad, Bruno Joseph Galati, was the fucking man. And I'm sure there's a lot of sons out there who feel that way about their dad, and they should. And I do. And that's it. So, ever since I was a kid, my dad was heavily involved in my life. Even through his drug addiction, heavily involved in my life. When I was a kid, I got cut from the baseball team. It's one of the most fond memories I've ever had with my dad. I got cut from the baseball team, and I came home, and I was so sad. I was so sad. I threw my glove on the ground, and I was crying in the middle of the living room. And my dad, he took me, and he was there for me. And he said, you know what? We're going to start our own team. So that's what my dad did. He figured out a way, working 40, 50 hours a week in heavy highway construction as a union laborer, local 57. He figured out a way to start his own team. And that's exactly what he did. And sure enough, he created this team, and we did well. And the following year, the team that I got cut from became a part of my dad's team. Because my dad, he was just a great guy. He was a great coach. And, you would hear him talk, and he would preach fundamentals. And like, you can't appreciate it as a 10-year-old. You just can't. But now as a 40-year-old man, I look back and I'm thinking, this guy was all in. He was all in for me and for every kid on the team. And, there was this one day, or one game rather, where it was a crucial play. Now, if you know anything about baseball, if the pitcher throws the ball and it bounces and the batter swings, it's considered a drop third strike, and you can run the first base. So one of the guys on our team swung at a pitch that bounced, and my dad's screaming like a maniac, run the first. And the umpire didn't know the rules. The umpire didn't know the rules that my dad did. And the umpire called our teammate out, And my dad challenged the play. And he, over a week span, won this review on some little league, not even really good baseball team. And my dad was so proud of that moment, so proud. And anytime it got brought up or anytime he had a chance to throw it into a conversation, which wasn't often because my dad wasn't that type of guy, he would be so happy and so proud. He'd be like, yo, man, remember that? We won that challenge, didn't we? And he was so proud of that moment. He was so proud of that moment. That's just the kind of guy he was. That's just the kind of guy he was. My dad, he would make like the weirdest dinners or like the weirdest meals at the weirdest times, rather. I remember one night, I think it was like a weekend, and he made some calf's liver. I'm like, what the fuck is calf's liver? I'm a little kid, and he would be like, yo, hey, you got to try this. It's good, right? This calf's liver, or like this crazy fucking soup. Yo, hey, it's good soup, right? It's good soup, right? I'm like, yeah, dude, it's good soup. Like, what do you want me to say? Like, he was just that guy. He was just that guy. He was such a caring person. Such a caring person. He would just put all his love and effort into like making my sister and me happy. The guy he was just lights out. He was lights out. And, I have a million stories like this. My dad, he was a legend in the neighborhood. All my friends knew him. Every friend that I had. Because in high school, my parents split up I think I was a freshman or a sophomore before shit really got ugly at the house. But my friends would sleep over every weekend. My dad would walk down the steps. This is before he's sober, and I don't think he was really like too far gone into his drug addiction at this point. He would walk down the steps in his tighty whities, hairy Italian chest, cigarette in his mouth, and he would be just bitching about everything. Like the place is a mess, you didn't clean up, just bitching. But then he would make us breakfast in his tighty whities, smoking a cigarette, flipping eggs at the stove. And any of my friends that ever get a chance to see this, they'll tell you that if he broke an egg while he was making breakfast for us, he'd be motherfucking to the roof on how mad he was about breaking the egg. We're just sitting there laughing. I could just picture me, my buddy Joe McGinnis, or Bill Trace, or Brian Fitzhenry, or any of these guys. Like, this fucking guy's crazy, and he wanted to make a perfect breakfast. That's all it was. That's all it was. So most people that knew my dad knew that he was a crazed Philly sports fan. He was a 4-for-4 guy, as we call it. Sixers, Flyers, Eagles, Phillies. He loved Nova. He loved Penn State. He loved Drexel. He loved Temple. If there was any affiliation to the city of Philadelphia, he loved it. He loved your team. And the funniest moment of my entire life, and I'm not even joking, the funniest moment of my entire life, it's like, I think, early 2020, right when like COVID happened, it was around that time. So everyone was wearing masks, and I had a doctor's appointment in the morning. I was giving blood, and I get into my truck at some random time, like before 9 a.m. in the morning. He called Angelo Cataldi in the morning, 94.1. Anyone that knows Philly sports knows Angelo was a big time guy in Philadelphia. So literally, turn the truck on, press the radio button. The very next thing that's on the radio is Angelo Cataldi saying, "Hey, Bruno, how you doing?" It was my fucking dad calling 94.1 WISP to talk shit about people walking out of ShopRite with their mask on and throwing their mask on the ground. He hated that shit. He hated litter. He wasn't against the masks. He was all for it. But when you walk out of the ShopRite and you throw your mask on the ground, he was pissed about it. Obviously, he called because he was talking about some sports or whatever, but like, I don't even remember that part. I just remember him talking shit about people walking out of ShopRite, like throwing the mask on the ground. And I'm thinking, like, why is he in the fucking ShopRite parking lot hanging out anyway? Well, my stepmom apparently was in ShopRite. I'm like, but this was the kind of guy he was, man. Like, he hated people that were not nice people. He hated bullies. If you were not nice, he didn't like you, which seems pretty fair and rational. And that's just the kind of guy he was. This guy, and I joke around to this day, he was the type of guy that you'd literally have to cut his leg off to miss work. And I say that because when my sister and I were really young, he was at work, and one of the guys that was working for him was taking a chainsaw and cutting down a tree. And I guess the chainsaw got stuck in the tree, and the guy yanked it back. And my dad was, maybe a little bit too close to the guy cutting the tree down for the chainsaw, but he was a supervisor, so I don't know the specifics on where he was at. But the chainsaw slipped out of the guy's hand and cut my dad in between his balls and his groin. And I remember the story when I was a kid. If it was a quarter inch one way, he's losing his leg. If it was a quarter inch the other way, he would have died. And he escaped unscathed. No injuries except for a huge cut, stitches, staples, or whatever. And he was fine. He was fine. And it was like it never happened. And I still joke to this day, because I'm the same. You got to cut my arm off to miss work. Cut my leg off to miss work. You can't miss work. That was the one thing my dad instilled in me. Now, it wasn't always the case. I would get banged up in my early 20s when I was still living at home. And my dad would say, there's no more bigger piece of shit than a guy who misses work after payday. And I've done that. And, what are you going to do? You live and you learn. But my dad, he was a huge family guy. He loved my nephews and my daughter more than anything on this planet. My daughter is going to be 21 next month, and she's the first grandchild. And I had her at 19 with her mother, and I was 19. I was a maniac, and my dad really, for the first handful of years, was the person that raised my daughter when she was with me. And my daughter was connected to my dad since day one. And they loved each other. And my daughter feels the pain of not having my dad probably almost as much as I do. And my dad was a huge part of my daughter's life. My daughter's name is Gia, and she's a beautiful person, and part of who she is today is because of my dad. And I think she would agree to that. And my sister had two boys, D'Angelo and Vinny, and my nephew D'Angelo is autistic, and my dad and him had this connection that it was so powerful. And and D'Angelo would get picked on every once in a while because he's special, and not that he is special. He's a special human. And my dad would lose his fucking mind. He loved that boy. He would take him bowling, and he would take him to get Slurpees, and take him to, my dad didn't have a bunch of money, so he'd take him to McDonald's and the Burger King and the ball pits and shit like that. And same with my nephew Vinny. My nephews and my daughter gave my dad so much joy. And my dad was the type of person, and I my sister would totally agree. He was the type of person, he'd be like, Dad, can you do me a favor and pick Gia up, or pick Vinny up, or pick D'Angelo up? Oh, what the fuck, man? I don't got time for this shit. And then he would do it anyway. And he'd pick the kids up, and whatever annoying feeling he had towards me or potentially my sister, it would all go away as soon as he would see my nephews and my daughter. And that's just the kind of guy he was. He loved his grandkids. He loved them. As close as I was to my dad, if I'm really being honest, he was closer to my sister than he was with me. And my sister, I won't, the only thing I'll say about a specific part of their connection is that my dad and my sister battled similar demons. And I think my dad had a personal connection to my sister because I think he knew the demons that my sister were fighting intimately, and he knew he just knew the pain that she was going through. And my sister lived next door to my dad for a long time, and she would visit him, and she would make him dinner. And my dad loved my sister so much. he always worried about me and he loved me. And, but he loved my sister so much. And, he worried about me because, I got 107 days sober and, I've been dealing with this death of 1,000 cuts for so long. And, so my dad always worried about me, but my sister pulled it together 17 years ago and she created this amazing life for herself. And, my dad, he really loved her. And, he gave my sister the greatest wedding speech ever. And if you listen to, or if you watch the podcast on YouTube, obviously you see all the pictures of my dad. And at the end, it's my dad closing out my sister's wedding speech. And he said, I guess I'll end it this way. And it's either one of my cousins or my aunts is in the audience. And they said, "We love you, Brew." And then my nephew, D'Angelo, says, "We love you, No-No." And my dad, at one point during the speech, he says to D'Angelo, "I'll be going to your wedding one day, won't I, pal?" And at the time when he said those words, there wasn't one person in the room that didn't think that was going to happen. So one of the hardest things that I have to process personally is, my dad wasn't there when I got married. So I know my dad loved me. He's an old school Italian guy. He was there for me whenever I needed him. But I don't really know what he thought of me deep down. I know my family will say he loved me and he said all these nice things about me, but selfishly, on my wedding night, I would have liked to hear how he would address me to my friends and my family. But that opportunity was taken away from me. And that's life. You'll never hear me say, never, that life is unfair, because it's not. It's fucking just life. It's harder sometimes than it needs to be. It's easier sometimes than it should be. It's just life. It's just life. So that's why I'm doing this podcast today. Because my dad, I want everyone to know what I thought of him. Because he made me the man I am today. The reason I work so hard. The reason why I have yet to give up. The reason why I keep trying. The reason why, no matter how difficult things get with my daughter and me, I'll never stop trying. And the reason why, no matter how things get challenging with my wife, I'll never stop trying. And I wanted the world to know what I thought of him. And 23 years sober today. And my sister's 38 today. And I'm dedicating this to them. So, thank you.
I guess I want to end it this way.
Love you, bro.
Yeah.
We love you, Dad.
I love all of you.
We love you, daughter.
I love you too.